Hi everyone, I'm officially making part 2 to this video series. In my first video, I kind of just talked about what was my purpose on doing this series. So if you don't know, you could go back and click the previous video. So in this particular video, I am going to be discussing like my childhood, kind of how I grew up and how that led me to my first diagnosis. So my parents met, I want to say, in 1998. They met in March, and by the end of April, they decided that they wanted to have a baby. Mind you, my parents were 19 years old. So we have my dad, Brock, and we have my mom, Nikki. And yeah, I'm literally a product of teens just falling in love and deciding that they wanted to have a baby. So here I am. I don't want to say facing the repercussions, but learning the lessons of two teenagers falling in love for sure. And with my dad and my mom. On my mom's side, I have two sisters, Key and Isis. And then on my dad's side, I have my sister Sterling. And even how my sister Sterling is such, that is such like a weird concept. So you guys are probably thinking like, oh, where does your stepmom come to play in all of this? So my stepmom is Sterling's mom. And me and Sterling are only 3 months apart. So my dad and Sterling's mom were best friends, and they had their deed in February, and then he met my mom in March. So there's a lot of surprises going on in the 90s. So I do have a sister that's 3 months older than me, and yeah, that kind of shifted the dynamic of my parents' relationships. My mom was pretty talented at holding grudges, and I really feel like she never forgave my dad, and that's why they never decided to work after all that news and all of the drama that just flushed out of that whole situation. And I really feel like that was like my first moment as a kid when I realized like, dang, I'm sad. Like, you know, I'm not around my dad. I see all these movies and TV shows with moms and dads on them, and I just wasn't living that experience. And I promise y'all, like every birthday from like 15 to below, I was wishing that my parents would get back together. I should have just been wishing for a pony or something, but that never really happened. And then my dad, we all lived in Colorado, and my mom decided to move us to Arizona. So I kind of grew up in another state than my dad. Don't get me wrong, my mom used to send us back to Colorado like every school break that we had so I could go see him. But it's still not the same growing up with your dad in your house all the time. And with that also being said, it made my mom very sad because she just felt like she couldn't find love. And I feel like she expressed that a lot to us as kids. And I see how that has reflected to us, even in who we dated when we were younger and now in adulthood. And it's a lot, you know, seeing your mom always cry about being lonely and feeling like she can never find love. Like, I mean, there was points where my mom was like, I don't want y'all watching like love movies, because she was like, this isn't real. So like that just gives you the mindset that we had since we were young children. And then around when I was about 9, my mom and my aunt were really close, and my aunt passed away from breast cancer. And that really shook up my whole mom's world, and she ended up being diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolarism, and she got hospitalized that year. So that was just a summer I was staying with my dad, and me and all my sisters, my mom's side, we all got split up and displaced. And I had to find out that my mom, like, I didn't understand what was going on as a child, and that news was delivered to me by my older sister Key, and she was just like, yeah, mom's crazy. And I'm like, okay, what you mean? And she was like, no, she's crazy, like she's in the straight house, like, or she's in the nut house, she's wearing a straight jacket and all this other stuff. And I'm only having the perception of what I've seen off of movies and stuff. So I think that's when my innocence was really taken, when I was a child. You know, I lived with my dad for that year, and I was totally separated from the siblings that I was always familiar with growing up with. Yes, Strong lived in Colorado, and we went to the same school, but we she didn't really spend the night at my dad's house like that. Like, you know, that's my sister, but it was more so like sister friend. And that year I became super depressed, and it took me a long time to realize how depressed I was as a kid. But man, like I used to write on my arms and said I hate myself, nobody loves me. And I'm talking about every day. Like I would make sure those words were imprinted in my skin every single day. I would make lists on the other hand and just write a list of people that hate me, my dad, my friends, my sister, whatever. And I just wore a hoodie all the time just to hide those things. And I'm like, wow, that was probably like, you know, almost a version of like self-harm, like not necessarily cutting yourself, but man, that was like the first step of it. And I really didn't get to talk to my mom as much as I wanted to that year. So I would say I was pretty depressed as a child. And then at the end of that school year, which was the 4th grade, and I was now 10, my mom got released and she was here to pick me up. And I'm just like, she's picking me up. Like I felt like I just now was getting adjusted to living in Colorado, and I gotta pick my stuff up and go back to Arizona. So just that displacement too in my childhood, I feel like made me very confused and emotional. And when I came back to Arizona, it was like, I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like, you know, I didn't think like we grew up in rough neighborhoods or anything like that. But once I came back, I was like, bro, like this is rough neighborhoods. Like, and so that really did show me like the level of my innocence. And it was hard after that. You know, my grandparents had to move in with my mom, so they were also there. My grandparents are super, super, super strict. And so I feel like my mom never really got to dictate the decisions and stuff of the house. Like I feel like my grandpa and my grandma always took charge of that, so it always made my mom feel inferior in a way. I know that made her depressed, and she just wanted to be this independent mother, and that made her struggle too. Like not feeling like she had the power, not having a partner, like all these things. And throughout my childhood, like I have witnessed my mom trying to attempt suicide multiple times. My first time of her doing it, I was in the 6th grade, and she tried to overdose on a lot of pills, like all her medications for schizophrenia and stuff. And like my grandparents didn't help us clean her up and like get her situated. Like that was me and my older sister, and I'm like 12 at this time, so that makes my older sister like 15, and we're cleaning up our doped up mom. Like all the pills she took, it was crazy. And we had to do all of that stuff. Like I had to bathe her, get her up. She couldn't even open her eyes or walk. Like that was a lot. And I remember thinking that grade during Christmas time, I was like, man, I don't want to go visit my dad. Like, how do I know that my mom's not going to take her life when I'm gone? And I'm sitting there crying about this at school. And it's just like I felt like nobody could understand. And that was 6th grade. And then 7th grade, you know, your emotions get even stronger, and you hit that prime peak of puberty. And I really feel like not only, yes, my emotions got stronger, but then my reflection and my actions of those emotions as well. So when I was like in the 7th grade, I mean, this is so hard for me to admit, but yeah, I was drinking a lot when I was a kid. Like stealing bottles from my mom's friends, stealing bottles from the store, getting drunk with my sister. At this time, I'm in 7th grade. My sister's a junior in high school, so I'm hanging out with high schoolers. And I'm just like, wow, like when I look back at it, like my first time ever really getting drunk, like I was like 13. And like, I'm talking about blackout drunk, like woke up and I'm like, what the hell happened? Like, and to even, when I think about my little cousins that are at that age right now, I'm just like, man, it makes me want to cry. Like, I would never want my cousins to feel the way that I felt during that time of my life. And if I could do anything to help them with that, I would. And you know, everybody really just turned a blind eye to it, I really feel like, because drinking at a young age also led me to like cutting myself. Like I had all types, I know people probably can't see it on this camera, but I have all types of cuts on my wrist. And like my mom would question it, and I just be like, oh, I fell or something like that. Like she never really got deep into the question. So it's just like we were just a house full of just depressed, sad humans. And the same for my older sister. Like she's tried to attempt to commit suicide before too. And I mean, I have too. So it just really shows you, like, you know, some people don't believe in generational trauma, but that generational trauma of just like being depressed and not wanting to live. And it's just like, you know, my mom is wanting to take her life, and she doesn't know that I feel just the exact same way as her. And these are just conversations that we're just constantly going over our heads. And you know, I'm starting to get in more and more trouble at school. Mind you, I've always been like great, always had perfect grades, but the behavior, that definitely was like a questionable thing for me. And just growing up like kind of in that unhealed environment. And by the time I got in high school, my mom's brother, he needed help with raising his kids, so my grandparents left us, which we always thought that was going to be a dream for us, but little do we know that how much that would like escalate for me and my siblings. And so my grandparents moved out, and we were all happy, like, oh, we got all this freedom. I finally have my own bedroom. Mind you, I've been sharing a bedroom since I was born. I didn't get my own bedroom until I was like sophomore. And you know, we thought it would be nice, but then that year my mom decided she wanted to stop taking her medication. And I don't know if anyone knows anyone with schizophrenia, but that's, you know, society does not build for people with schizophrenia to be able to function without their medication. They're just constantly pump these meds. And my mom at that time had already been on her meds for what, like 6 years. And so no, she didn't know how to adjust without being on that medication. As soon as she stopped taking it, she lost her job. And that put everything in question for us. Like, they were talking about us losing our house. Mind you, I've lived in that house since second grade. And so I'm a sophomore. They're like, you're going to lose your house. Our Section 8 was getting cut off. Our food stamps was getting cut off. Like, my mom was becoming super manic. She wasn't letting us sleep. She was making us clean like 24 hours out of the day. She didn't want us to go to school. But, you know, like I said, I've always been kind of like a schoolgirly. So I literally had to like sneak out of the house to go to school, and it just kept getting worse. And like, me and my siblings were scared for our lives, so we literally had to we had to sign a petition for my mom to get placed into the mental institution that year, and it was 2015. And she was in there for about a week, but in the state of Arizona you can't hold anybody against their will, so then they released my mom. Ironically, she met somebody inside of the mental institution that also wasn't taking his medication, and they apparently fell in love, and she brought him home. Mind you, my mom has always been super strict about guys. She never let men come into our house. And so this is how I really knew that something, like, you know, that she really was sick. She brought this man to my house. They did get married. They went to the courthouse and they got married. And things just started getting crazier from there, because now we have 2 people in the house that were not medicated. And so like, me and my siblings, we all had to sleep in the same room, or we would travel like an hour on the city bus to go sleep in my sister's dorm room. I mean, I remember a distinct time when my mom was arguing with me about something so small. You know, they get triggered really easily. So she was arguing with me, and she storms out the house, and I like keep my door closed. My door was closed, and then her husband came to my door and was like, if you're disrespecting your mom, you're disrespecting me. And I was like, who are you? Like, I have a dad. And he was like, but he isn't here right now. And he started saying all these crazy things to me, and I'm like, I don't care. And next thing you know, he's trying to like get into my room. Like, he's shaking the door handle, trying to get in. So I'm like popping the screen out to like jump out the window with me and my little sister. And so that's kind of like the environment we were in. And then as soon as school ended, my mom told us we all had to like leave. And so that summer I got moved to Texas, and I moved in with like my aunt and uncle. And realistically, I thought I was just only going there for the summer, and I ended up having to stay there because things with my mom just got a lot worse. And so now me and my sisters from my dad's side, Key and Isis, were all 3 displaced again, and it's a little bit worse this time. So my little sister is now living with my grandparents. My older sister is living all the way in Virginia with my older cousin, and I was in Texas with my aunt in like San Antonio area. But Isis was with my grandparents in the Dallas area. And yet, like I said earlier, like moving somebody that's young, it really does, like, I don't want people to feel guilty for moving their children, because sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But like the displacement that I had in my life, like it really did affect me. And so, moving in with my aunt and uncle, like they're starting their family. Like my aunt was pregnant, they had a daughter, and they were living in an apartment, ready, plans on moving into a house within the next year. And then they just get this full-fledged 16-year-old, and I'm forever grateful for them bringing me in bringing me in their home. And I knew that they did the best that they could, but at the time, what I wanted and the mindset that I was in, I didn't feel like it was enough for me. I just felt like, like an oddball. Like, I really want to be with my parents, and I'm grateful that they were a version of parents for me, but it also wasn't my parents, like I want to laugh and see my parents see me graduate and like do all these things. So it was really difficult. I could barely talk to my mom, because anytime I tried calling her, she was just like cussing me out and stuff. And that was hard for me to go through. And so that was my junior year of high school. So at the end of that year, I got a call while I was at work, and my cousin was like, "Have you heard from your mom in a long time?" And I'm like, "No, it's been like 15 days since I heard from her. I call her every single day and she just don't answer." She's like, "Well, I'm going to send the non-emergency police line to your house." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds cool." So she calls a non-emergency police line. Mind you, at the same time, my neighbor at that house was a really close friend of me. So she's also calling me on the line. It's like, "Girl, do you know the police at your house?" I'm like, "Yeah." My cousin called them. "Have you seen my mom in a while?" And she was like, "Girl, I literally haven't seen your mom in like 2 weeks. And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's weird." And at the time, the police thought I was the oldest kid. So when they came out of the house, my neighbor was standing there, and she was like, "Yeah, I have her daughter on the phone." And I get the phone, and mind you, I'm just like on a break at lunch or at work. And I get on the phone, and the police officer was like, "Yeah, we didn't find anything in the house until we went in the garage and we found a deceased body." And I'm like, that literally can't be anybody but my mom. Like I said, I've been living in this house since I was in the 2nd grade. And so I instantly start breaking down, screaming at my job. I didn't have a car, so I couldn't leave. I had to wait for my aunt and uncle to pick me up. And that really just shook my world. The last conversation I had with my mom, it was an argument. I told her I didn't want to live with her again, because she like put me through all of this stuff. And my mom was into, I don't want to say she was into Joe's work, but I mean, my mom was the one that showed me The Secret when I was 8 years old. She was the one that showed me how to make a vision board. And that was even one of the signs that I got when I was at Joe. Like, the first vision board I ever made was on a butterfly kite. And when I was at the Joe retreat and I walked past the gift shop, I found that exact butterfly kite. I'm talking about it down to the packaging. It was the same kite. So like stuff like that. And she just, at some point, when my aunt passed away, she just stopped believing all that stuff, because we were trying to practice it in the house, checks in the mail, vision boards, doing all these things. But yeah, she lost herself along the way. And so dealing with my mom's death was really hard for me. And it wasn't until the day after I found that she died, I found out how she died, when the coroner called me. And then he was just like, "Oh yeah," and he told me all my dogs died. My mom had 3 dogs, they were all dead too. So I was like, okay, she must have been in the house for a long time. And he was like, "Well, it's obvious and like how your mom died." And I was like, "No, they didn't tell me anything." And that's when they told me, like, my mom hung herself. And what she used to hang herself, the chair, the rope, I'm telling you, we had those things since we were a kid. We had like an orange nylon rope in the garage for as long as I can remember. And I just can't believe she used items that I'm like, can like distinctly remember where they were at in the garage. And if things weren't hard enough, that definitely set it off for me. Me and all my siblings went spiraling. And it's even crazy because I was the first person to know that my mom was dead. So then I had to call everybody. I had to call my older sister, I had to call my little sister, I had to call my grandparents, I had to call my cousin. Like, I was the one that had to break all the news to people. So like hearing people's reactions, and then just feeling like nobody understood me. Like, I had friends whose parents passed away, but I used to be like, it's not the same. And which is kind of invalidating. But yeah, I'd be like, it's not the same. And I really lived in a victim mentality after that. Like, even hardcore. I'm like, why's my life got to be so hard? Like, why did I have to lose my mom? Like, why can't I be a normal kid? I just wanted to be normal. And, so me starting out my senior year with my mom being passed away, like, that was a lot for me. And even after I graduated and I went to college, like, college was a lot. Everybody in college realizes that their mom is their best friend and that they were always right in those things. And I just had to watch all of my friends experience that in like the clubs I was in, because we would have like group discussions and stuff. And like, I'd hear everyone say that. And I'm just like, man, like, I really missed that opportunity with my mom. Like, our relationship was trash before she passed away. And now I'm also on this college campus where, like, in high school, you're a big fish in a little pond, and then you go to being a little fish in a big pond. And I really feel like I just didn't know myself. I didn't know my purpose. I literally remember crying outside of my dorm room, and I was just like, God, like, why am I here? Why don't I know that I'm important? What is my purpose on this earth? Like, I want to do more. I want to feel important in some type of way. And then I started out my sophomore year. And my sophomore year, I was able to move into my first apartment. And so I moved into my apartment. I'm like, man, school's changing around, because I did not have fun my freshman year. I felt like it was nothing but stressful. But I used to have really bad anxiety. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to like school. Like, school's going great. I'm starting to make more friends. I'm starting to enjoy the parties and activities I'm going to. I loved living in an apartment versus a dorm with a community bathroom. And I would say it was spring semester of my sophomore year. 10 days before my 20th birthday, I found a mass in my, like, where your breast and your armpit meet. I found a mass in there, and I was like, wow, like, that's ironic. I just got off the phone with my doctor's office, so I called them back, and I was like, hey, can you guys schedule me for a breast exam? I want to just get one, because I feel like I found, like, this lump in there. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. So I went in for my appointment. She did my breast exam, and she was like, yeah, this does seem really concerning. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and then she sends me in to go get a biopsy, and I went to get the biopsy, and about 7 days later they called me, and she was on the phone. And mind you, this lady is usually a very chipper person. She was not chipper at all. And she was like, yeah, I just want to let you know you have invasive ductal carcinoma. And I'm like, okay, what the hell is that? Let's get this shit out the way. And she was like, no, girl, that's cancer. And I'm like, what the hell? And once again, my world is shook up. I'm not living nowhere near my siblings. My aunt and uncle had just moved to another state because my aunt got a job promotion. My dad still lives in New York. So during that time period, I really feel like I relied on my friends a lot. And, I had high expectations that my friends would be there for me along the way. They'll understand emotionally. And I put a lot of pressure on them. So, and with putting that pressure on them, it allowed me to break my own heart. Because when I look back and be like, what really could a 19-year-old, you don't know anything at 19, what could a bunch of 19-year-olds really do for me? Like, it's hard for people even in their 50s that get a diagnosis to show up for other people. So what could I really expect from a kid? So yeah, I felt like I lost a lot of friends that year. And that really shook my world too. Because, like, being the middle child, statistically, you just rely on your friends more. So that kind of shook my world, and I lost some really important friendships to me. And that was, like, probably some of the worst breakups that I ever went through. Like, it took me years to get over those lost friendships. So with that being said, I went through 16 rounds of chemo. I did not get radiation because I had a G mutation, where they say that, when the doctors are like, oh, you have cancer fighting cells in your body, they said that G mutation didn't allow me to have cancer fighting cells. So they think that mixed with the BRCA G mutation was the reason I was diagnosed so young. And so they were like, we don't want to do radiation just in case, like, it causes anything else. So yes, I only got the 16 rounds of chemo and a double mastectomy. And it was hard. I didn't take no time off of school. I was still doing all my classes, and it wasn't like I was taking easy classes at that time. Like, I was taking sociology, statistics, human anatomy and physiology, pathopharmacology, literature. Like, these were complex classes. And, I still managed to get through the semester, make the dean's list. I worked really hard. And I really wasn't putting my health first at that time. Everybody told me to drop out and just focus on myself. And I was just like, why the hell would I do that? Like, you want me to live in a college city and not go to college? And I really felt like doing school was what was keeping me healthy. Now when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, like I wasn't putting myself first. Like, I was just so worried about hitting an accomplishment more than like feeding my body and my mind. And I was able to get through it all. And by the time I got my double mastectomy, there was nothing left in my body. So it was literally just removing breast tissue to not have a reoccurrence and stuff like that. And with all that being said, when I had my surgery, I also got accepted into my medical program at college, which I applied to be a radiation therapist, which a lot of people don't know what that is, but I treat cancer patients with radiation. And yes, that was already my major when I first got to college. So this diagnosis has nothing to do with me picking my major. It was just like a silver lining between all those things. And so yeah, I got accepted into my program. And at first I thought they weren't going to accept me because I did have to go tell the dean that I had that diagnosis before interviews started. And I really thought they were going to tell me that I couldn't do the program. And he was like, you're in the program. You don't even gotta go through the interview. You in the program. Like, this is gonna be a great experience for you, for your classmates, to see stuff firsthand and get personal. And so I was like, wow. Like, all the things that you always end up worrying about, they always end up working themselves out, like, without you needing to do anything. So I really felt like, my first diagnosis was coming to an end and things were getting somewhat better, but I knew deep down inside I was still depressed. And, I have to thank my classmates a lot because they had seen that transition from me being those two transitions. And, even when I met them, like, I was still sad. Like, I remember leaving the school bus one day and I was like, I'm going to jump in front of a car. So that kind of tells you where my mindset was still at that time. I still was not grateful for my life. Sorry, my dog. Yeah, I still was not grateful for my life. So then 6 months later, I was diagnosed again. And that's why I start my next video.